A young billionaire was walking late at night and saw a little girl holding a newborn. When he asked and heard their names, he broke down in tears. The November night was colder than usual when Ethan left the office. He shoved his hands into his coat pockets as he walked alone through the partially empty streets. The day had been like so many others: endless meetings, tight deadlines, and the constant feeling that something was missing in his life. He decided to take a shortcut through the park. The soft yellow glow of the street lamps barely lit the path, but he knew that route by heart. That was when he heard it, a weak cry, almost drowned out by the wind. He stopped, tilting his head to identify where it was coming from. He followed the sound to a bench partially covered by the shadow of a tree. There, curled up against the cold backrest, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, with dark, messy hair and a pale face. But what really caught Ethan's attention was what she clutched to her chest, an armful of blankets from which the crying noise emerged. "Hi," Ethan said gently, stopping at a safe distance. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up quickly, startled. Her eyes, even in the dark, showed fear but also something else, determination. Immediately, she hunched over the bundle like a human shield. "Don't come closer," she warned, her voice trembling but firm. Ethan raised his hands, showing he had no intention of approaching without permission. "It's all right. I just want to help. It's too cold for you to stay here." The baby in the blankets cried louder, and the girl tried to rock him awkwardly. "What are your names?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice calm. The girl hesitated, studying him with suspicion. After a few seconds, she answered, "I'm Lillian, and this is my brother, Noah." Ethan felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. Lillian, Noah. His legs weakened, and he needed to steady himself on the bench. Unexpected tears blurred his vision as a wave of memories swept over him. Sophie, smiling, curled up against him on the couch, a pen between her fingers as they scribbled names in a notebook. "Lillian for a girl," she had said, looking at him with those eyes that always seemed to see right through him. "It means purity, innocence." "And if it's a boy?" he asked, kissing her forehead. "Noah," Sophie replied without hesitation. "It means rest, peace. That's what our child will bring to our lives." They had planned everything: the house, the names, the future. Until one day, Sophie simply disappeared from his life. "Sir, are you all right?" Lillian's voice brought him back to the present. She was watching him, her suspicion now mixed with concern. Ethan quickly wiped away his tears with the back of his hand. "Yes, I'm fine," he replied, trying to smile. "Sorry, it's just, those names are very special to me." The baby, Noah, cried again, more insistently. Lillian tried to soothe him, but it was clear she was exhausted too. "Have you been here long?" Ethan asked. Lillian lowered her eyes. "Since it got dark." Ethan looked around. The park was deserted. The temperature kept dropping, and these children clearly needed immediate help. "Lillian," he said, choosing his words carefully, "you can't stay out here in the cold." Noah could get sick. For the first time, he saw the girl's brave facade falter. She looked at the baby with genuine worry. "I live nearby," Ethan continued. "A warm, safe place. We can feed Noah and you can rest. What do you think?" Lillian bit her lip, obviously torn. Her instincts told her not to trust strangers, but her little brother needed help. "Will you take care of us?" she finally asked, her voice small. "I will," Ethan answered, and realized he truly meant it. Slowly, he stepped closer and offered his coat to wrap the baby more securely. Lillian allowed him to approach, but her watchful eyes missed nothing. "May I carry Noah?" he offered. "He must be heavy for you." After a long hesitation, she nodded. When Ethan took the bundle, his heart pounded. The baby seemed no more than a few weeks old, tiny, fragile, and now under his protection. "Come," he said, extending his hand to Lillian. After a moment of indecision, she took it. They walked in silence through the dark streets, Lillian clinging to Ethan's hand, constantly glancing at her brother in his arms. Noah had calmed down a bit, but he still made small sounds of discomfort. "This is it," Ethan said, indicating the elegant building ahead. Lillian looked up, her eyes wide at its height. "You live here?" "On the top floor," Ethan replied, guiding her inside. In the elevator, he noticed how tense Lillian was, ready to bolt at any sign of danger. "It's all right," he assured her. "You're safe now." When the elevator door opened directly into the penthouse, Lillian let out a quiet gasp. Ethan's apartment was spacious and well decorated, but cold in its perfection, as though no one really lived there. "Let's take care of Noah first," Ethan said, leading them into the living room. He turned on the heater and delicately placed the baby on the sofa. "Does he need to eat?" Lillian nodded, not taking her eyes off her brother. "He's hungry. I'll need to go out to buy some formula for him. Will you be all right for a few minutes?" He saw the fear in her eyes again. "You'll come back." Ethan knelt to be at Lillian's eye level. "I'll come back. I promise." As he headed to the door, he looked back. Lillian had sat down beside her brother, her small hand stroking the baby's face. That image, protection, unconditional love, hit him hard. Lillian. Noah. The names he and Sophie had chosen for their children, a cruel coincidence or something more. He couldn't say, but he was sure of one thing: his life had changed forever on that cold November night. Ethan returned from the pharmacy at record speed. He came into the apartment loaded with bags, baby formula, bottles, diapers, and some basic groceries. He found Lillian exactly where he had left her, sitting next to her brother on the couch. Her tired eyes had not strayed from the baby for even a second. "I'm back," he announced softly so as not to startle her. Lillian looked up, a mix of relief and caution on her face. "Noah hasn't stopped crying. We'll fix that right now." Ethan went to the kitchen and prepared a bottle according to the instructions on the package. He tested the temperature on his wrist, like he'd seen in a movie somewhere. He returned to the living room and held out the bottle to Lillian, but hesitated. "Would you like to feed him, or would you rather I do it?" "I'll do it," she replied promptly, taking the bottle. With surprising skill for someone so young, she positioned the baby and placed the bottle correctly. Noah began to drink eagerly. "You're really good at this," Ethan commented, sitting in an armchair across from her. "I always help with him," Lillian said, her eyes fixed on the baby. Ethan studied the girl. Despite her age, she carried herself almost like an adult, the kind of responsibility no 6-year-old should ever have to bear. "Lillian, we need to take your brother to a doctor for a checkup," he said gently, "just to make sure he's okay." The girl clutched the baby tighter. "They're not going to take him away, right?" "No, of course not," Ethan assured her. "You two will stay here with me, but newborns need special care, and I want to make sure Noah is healthy." After a few phone calls, Ethan managed to find a pediatrician, an acquaintance of a colleague, who agreed to make a house call, even at that hour. While they waited, Ethan prepared something for Lillian to eat. She accepted the sandwich but ate with only one hand, refusing to let go of Noah. "You can stay here tonight," Ethan said. "I have a guest room we can set up." Lillian just nodded, her eyes heavy with fatigue but still alert. Every noise made her glance at the door, as though expecting someone to appear at any moment. The doctor's arrival visibly tensed Lillian. She watched every move with wary eyes as the pediatrician examined her brother. "He's a healthy baby," concluded the doctor, putting his instruments away. "Carried to term, responding well, no signs of dehydration despite the circumstances. I'd guess he's about 2 weeks old." 15 days, Lillian corrected. The doctor smiled at her. "You're a great big sister." After the pediatrician left, Ethan noticed how exhausted Lillian looked. Dark circles under her eyes, and she struggled to keep them open. "I think it's time for a bath and then sleep," he suggested. "What do you think?" "Noah first," she insisted. In the bathroom, Ethan filled the sink with warm water. Sensing his uncertainty, Lillian took the lead. "You have to support his head like this," she demonstrated, placing one hand under the baby's neck. "And clean him gently." Ethan watched in admiration as the 6-year-old expertly cared for her brother. Together, they bathed Noah, dried him, and dressed him in a onesie Ethan had bought in haste. "Now it's your turn," he told Lillian. The girl looked at her brother, hesitant to leave him. "He can stay in the bathroom with us," Ethan reassured. I'll keep him right here." Finally agreeing, Lillian let Ethan fill the bathtub for her. He stepped out to give her privacy, leaving clean towels and a child's pajama set that had once belonged to a niece who'd visited him. "Call me if you need help," he said before partially closing the door. While he waited, Ethan improvised a crib for Noah. He remembered reading somewhere that newborns could sleep in drawers when there was no crib available. He emptied the widest drawer of the guest room dresser, lined it with clean sheets cut, and placed it on the bed. As he organized the room, his thoughts drifted. The coincidences were too many to ignore. The children's names, Lillian's age, but now wasn't the time for such reflections. The children needed immediate care. Lillian emerged from the bathroom wearing pajamas that were slightly too big. She carried Noah wrapped in a towel. "Come see where you'll sleep tonight," Ethan said, leading them to the guest room. Lillian looked at the makeshift crib and, for the first time, a small smile appeared on her face, like a little nest. "Exactly," Ethan agreed. "A cozy little nest for Noah." She carefully set her brother into the drawer crib, then climbed onto the bed and lay next to it, keeping one hand on him at all times. "You must be so tired," Ethan commented, pulling the covers over her. "I have to take care of Noah," she mumbled, already fighting sleep. "I'll stay here," he promised. "How you can rest?" He sat in the armchair in the corner of the room. Lillian still watched him, distrustful, but fatigue won out. In minutes, her eyes were closed. Ethan remained there, gazing at the two children fate had placed in his care. Noah slept peacefully in his improvised crib. Lillian had finally surrendered to exhaustion, but even in sleep, she kept a protective hand on her brother. The situation felt surreal. In one night, his empty and silent apartment had become a refuge for these two vulnerable children. And those names, Lillian and Noah, kept echoing in his mind, stirring memories of a future that had never come to pass. He looked out the window at the city lights. Tomorrow he would need to learn more about their situation and figure out a way to help them. But for now, they were safe. During the night, Noah woke up twice. Both times, Lillian woke instantly, ready to tend to her brother. Ethan helped with diaper changes and bottle preparation, impressed by the girl's protective instinct. "You can sleep," he said while feeding Noah the second time. "I'll take care of him." Lillian hesitated, still distrustful, but weariness prevailed. She lay down again, though her eyes stayed on him until sleep finally overtook her. Ethan stayed awake the rest of the night, watching over the children. He thought about how his life had completely changed in just a few hours. He had left that morning for just another day of work, and returned to an apartment that now sheltered two children. Morning light began to fill the room, a faint winter glow slipping through the curtains. Noah slept peacefully, and Lillian was finally resting deeply. Ethan realized that, for the first time in a long while, he felt truly needed. Whatever happened next, these children needed him now. And in some strange way, he needed them too. He took out his phone and silently snapped a photo of them both asleep. He didn't know why. Maybe to remember this surreal moment, maybe to have something to show if all of this ended. Or maybe because, deep down, he already knew these two little ones had found a place in his heart. Morning arrived with the first rays of sunlight streaming into the guest room. Ethan, who had dozed off in the armchair, awoke to the gentle sound of Lillian humming to her brother. She was already sitting up in bed, cradling Noah. "Good morning," he said, rubbing his eyes. "Did you sleep well?" Lillian nodded shyly. She seemed more relaxed than the night before, though she still kept that protective stance toward the baby. "Noah woke up hungry," she explained. "I'll make breakfast for all of us," Ethan offered, standing up. "Do you like pancakes?" The girl's eyes lit up for a moment. Mom used to make pancakes on Sundays. It was the first time she mentioned her mother voluntarily. Ethan tried to seem casual as he prepared a bottle for Noah. "What's your mom's name?" he asked, handing the bottle to Lillian. "Sophie," she replied simply. Ethan almost dropped the bowl he was holding. Sophie, the same name as the woman who had left him, taking all hope of a family with her. Another coincidence. "Sophie," he repeated, trying to keep his voice steady. "That's a pretty name." Lillian nodded, adjusting Noah so he could drink. "Mom's really pretty too. She has dark hair like mine and plays the piano really well." Piano. Another link. The Sophie Ethan had known was a pianist who'd studied at a conservatory. "She teaches piano," Lillian continued, not realizing the impact of her words. "People come to our place to learn." "Where do you live?" Ethan asked casually, beginning to make pancakes while trying to stay calm. "In a small apartment near the Big Trees Park. We only have one bedroom. I sleep with Mom, and Noah has a tiny crib next to us." Ethan pictured the simple apartment Lillian was describing, so different from his own spacious and impersonal penthouse. "But it's nice," the girl added, as though defending her home. "There are flowers on the windowsill and Mom's piano in the living room. And we have lots of books too." "It sounds lovely," Ethan commented, flipping the pancakes. "And your mom teaches piano right there at home?" Lillian nodded, finishing feeding Noah. "Every day except Sunday. That's our rest day," Mom says. "We make pancakes and go to the park." After breakfast, while Lillian was fascinated by some cartoons on TV, a novelty to her, Ethan picked up his phone and stepped away to make some calls. He began calling nearby hospitals, asking for a Sophie with no known last name. 3 hospitals later, he still had no leads. There was no patient named Sophie in any of their maternity wards. As he made these calls, Ethan glanced at the children. He couldn't help noticing Lillian's resemblance to the Sophie he had known. The same eyes, the shape of her face, even subtle mannerisms he recalled so well. The ages matched perfectly too. 6 years, exactly how long it had been since Sophie disappeared from his life without explanation. Could it be possible? The idea had been forming in his mind since he heard the children's names. Could Lillian be his daughter? His thoughts were interrupted when Lillian approached him, Noah now asleep on the couch surrounded by cushions to keep him safe. "What's that?" she asked, pointing to the grand piano in the corner of the living room, which he rarely used. "That's a piano," Ethan answered. "Do you know how to play?" "Mom's teaching me," Lillian said, walking over to the instrument with reverence. "Can I?" "Of course." She climbed onto the bench, adjusting herself to the right height like someone who had done it many times. Then, to Ethan's surprise, her small fingers began to move over the keys, playing a simple melody with impressive accuracy for a 6-year-old. "That's beautiful," Ethan exclaimed, genuinely impressed. "Mom says I have a good ear," Lillian explained, a shy smile on her face. It was the first time Ethan saw her truly smile. "She plays much better. When I grow up, I want to play just like her. May I play a piece for you?" Ethan offered. When Lillian nodded, he sat next to her on the bench and began playing a gentle melody. It was a piece Sophie used to love, something they played together during the happiest days of their relationship. Lillian's eyes widened. "That's the music Mom plays when she's sad." Ethan's hands froze on the keys, another link, more certainty forming in his chest. Without a doubt, the Sophie Lillian was describing was the same woman he had loved and never truly forgotten. While Lillian continued experimenting with the piano keys, fascinated, Ethan watched her every move. The gestures, the concentration, her posture, all reminded him of Sophie. But now he also saw something of himself in her, the shape of her chin, the way she furrowed her brow when concentrating. How hadn't he noticed before? How had he missed the signs from the first moment in the park? Noah stirred, whimpering softly, and Lillian immediately left the piano to check on him. Ethan observed the scene, a new understanding dawning on him. These children weren't just lost. They were, in some inexplicable way, connected to his past, his present, and possibly his future. "Lillian," he called gently, "do you know where your mom is right now?" The girl picked Noah up, rocking him softly. "At the hospital. She got sick after Noah was born." A new sense of purpose rose up in Ethan. He had to find Sophie, not just to ensure the children's safety, but to understand everything, to learn the truth. "I'll help you find her," he promised. Lillian's small smile, tinged with hope, made his heart tighten. He looked at the 2 children destiny had placed in his path, or perhaps returned to him, and knew that whatever he discovered, his life would never be the same again. Over the next day, Ethan couldn't take his eyes off Lillian. With each passing hour, he saw more and more similarities between the girl and Sophie. It wasn't just the physical traits, the same almond-shaped eyes, the gentle curve of her chin, the dark hair that fell in natural waves. It was her mannerisms, the little details only someone who had known Sophie intimately would recognize. The way Lillian tilted her head slightly when focusing on something, how she bit her lower lip when thinking. Even the quick motion of blowing hair off her face when her hands were occupied, exactly like Sophie used to do in those moments. "What's wrong?" Lillian asked, noticing Ethan watching her while she played with some colorful blocks he found tucked away. "Nothing," he replied with a smile. "You just remind me of someone." "Who?" Ethan hesitated. "Someone very important to me." Lillian seemed satisfied with the answer and went back to stacking blocks, building a tower while Noah slept on the couch, safely cushioned. While preparing lunch, Ethan did mental calculations. Lillian was 6 years old. Sophie had disappeared from his life about 6 years and 7 months ago. The timing was perfect. If Sophie had been pregnant when she left, maybe that explained her sudden departure. But why not tell him? Why vanish without a word? So many questions without answers. The biggest one? Could Lillian be his daughter? "Ethan," Lillian called, interrupting his thoughts. "Noah needs a diaper change." He approached the couch where the baby was squirming in discomfort. "I'll do it. You've already done so much." "I don't mind," Lillian said, watching as Ethan carefully changed the baby. "I like taking care of Noah. We're a team, Mom always says." "Your mom sounds really special," Ethan said casually, trying to learn more. "She's the best mom in the world," Lillian declared with conviction. Then her face clouded with sadness. "I miss her." Ethan felt a pang in his chest. "We'll find her, I promise." After lunch, Ethan decided to resume calling hospitals. This time, he had more information: the first name, approximate age, and the fact that Sophie had recently given birth and might be experiencing postnatal complications. On the fourth call, he finally got a lead. "Yes, we have a patient named Sophie in the intensive care unit," the receptionist informed him. "Admitted 2 weeks ago after childbirth complications." Ethan's heart raced. "Sophie who? What's her last name?" "I'm sorry, I can't provide that information over the phone. Are you a relative?" Ethan hesitated. "I'm taking care of her children, her older daughter, Lillian, and the newborn, Noah." There was a brief silence on the other end. "In that case, I suggest you come in person. Bring the children and any documentation so we can verify the situation." After he hung up, Ethan found Lillian watching him closely. "Did you find my mom?" she asked, hope shining in her eyes. "I think so," he said, kneeling down to her level. "There's a Sophie in a hospital not too far from here. We'll go check first thing tomorrow, okay?" Lillian nodded eagerly, a smile lighting up her face. Impulsively, she threw her arms around Ethan's neck, hugging him tightly. It was the first spontaneous display of affection from the girl, and something inside him melted. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder. That small hug sealed something between them. For the rest of the day, Lillian seemed more open, more trusting around Ethan. She allowed him to handle the baby more while she drew pictures or played a few notes on the piano. During dinner, Lillian shared more about her life with Sophie, how her mom always made her favorite food on tough school days, how they loved to sing together while Sophie played piano, and how they would go to the park on Sundays, even in cold weather. Each story was another confirmation. The Sophie she was describing was undoubtedly the same woman Ethan had loved. The same kindness, the same passion for music, even the same favorite recipes. Later, while helping Lillian get ready for bed, Ethan casually asked, "Did your mum ever talk about your dad?" Lillian, already tucked in beside Noah's makeshift crib, frowned slightly. "Sometimes she looks at a photo and gets sad. I think it's him, but I never asked." "Why not?" The girl shrugged. "I didn't want to make her sadder." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "I understand. We'll see your mom tomorrow, okay? We should get some sleep." After Lillian dozed off, Ethan sat in the living room with a glass of whiskey, trying to piece together his thoughts. The coincidences were overwhelming. Sophie. The children's names, just like they had chosen together. Lillian's age. The physical resemblances. Early the next morning, he prepared everything. He bought new clothes for the children, wanting them to look presentable for Sophie. He packed a bag with everything Noah might need, diapers, bottles, a change of clothes. Lillian was so excited she could hardly eat breakfast. She put on the new outfit Ethan had bought, a simple blue dress with a white cardigan, and helped get Noah ready. "Do you think she'll be awake?" Lillian asked as Ethan adjusted the infant car seat he had purchased. "I'm not sure," he said honestly. "But even if she isn't, I'm sure she'll know you're there." On the drive to the hospital, Ethan's heart pounded. After 6 years, he was about to see Sophie again, and possibly discover he had a daughter, and maybe even a son. He glanced in the rearview mirror at Lillian, who hummed softly to Noah. Whatever happened today, these children had already changed his life completely. The hospital loomed ahead, a tall white building. Ethan parked and helped Lillian out, carrying Noah against his chest. "Ready?" he asked, extending his free hand to Lillian. The girl nodded, gripping his hand firmly. Together, they walked toward the hospital entrance, each step taking them closer to the truth that could change everything. The hospital was busy that morning. Ethan held Noah securely, while Lillian clung to his free hand. They crossed the main lobby to the reception desk, where a middle-aged woman greeted them with a polite smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "We're looking for Sophie," Ethan said, leaning slightly over the counter. "I called yesterday. She was admitted about 2 weeks ago with post-birth complications." The receptionist typed something into her computer. "Sophie? Yes. We have a patient by that name in the ICU. Are you a relative?" Before Ethan could answer, Lillian spoke up. "We're her kids. I'm Lillian and this is Noah." The receptionist's gaze softened when she looked at the children. "I see. And you, sir?" Ethan hesitated a moment. "I'm a close friend. I've been caring for the children since she was hospitalized." After checking some documents and hearing Ethan's explanation of the unusual situation, they were directed to the 6th floor, where the intensive care unit was located. In the elevator, Lillian grew uncharacteristically silent, squeezing Ethan's hand tighter with each floor they ascended. "You okay?" he asked gently. "What if she doesn't wake up?" Lillian's voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan crouched down, still holding Noah, to look her in the eye. "Your mom is strong, Lillian. We'll be there for her every day until she wakes up." In the ICU hallway, they were met by a nurse who took them to a waiting area. "The doctor will come talk to you first," she explained. Soon, a man in a white coat with a serious expression entered the room. "I'm Dr. Martinez, in charge of Ms. Sophie's case. How is she?" Ethan asked immediately. The doctor glanced briefly at the children before replying, "She's stable but still in a medically induced coma. She had severe hemorrhaging after giving birth, which led to complications. We managed to stabilize her, but her body needs time to recover." "Is she going to wake up?" Lillian's small voice made them all look at her. Dr. Martinez crouched to her level. "Your mom is fighting very hard, little one. The signs are positive, but we need to be patient." "Can we see her?" Ethan asked. "Yes, but only for 15 minutes, and I should warn you, she's hooked up to a lot of equipment. It might be scary, especially for the kids." Ethan looked at Lillian. "Would you like me to go in first, or do you want to go now?" Lillian shook her head firmly. "I want to see her now." They followed the doctor through double doors into an area quiet, except for the constant beep of monitors. Sophie's room was the third on the right. When the door opened, Ethan felt his heart stop for a moment. There she was. Sophie, after 6 long years. Her face was paler than he remembered, stark against the white pillow, her dark hair spread around her head. Tubes and wires connected her frail body to various machines that monitored her vital signs. Even in this state, it was unmistakably Sophie. The Sophie he had loved. The Sophie who had vanished from his life without explanation. The Sophie who, he now suspected, was the mother of his daughter. "Mom!" Lillian's muffled cry jolted him back to reality. The girl ran to the bedside, stopping abruptly as though afraid touching her mother might hurt her. Her small shoulders began to quake with silent sobs. "It's okay," Ethan said softly, moving closer with Noah. "You can hold her hand. She'll know you're here." Hesitantly, Lillian reached out and touched Sophie's fingers. "Mom, it's me," she whispered. "I brought Noah to see you. We're fine. Ethan's taking care of us." Ethan felt a knot in his throat. He adjusted Noah so the baby was closer to his mother. The newborn's eyes were open, looking around without really understanding. "Hi, Sophie," he said at last, his voice almost breaking. "It's been a long time." It was surreal to stand there next to the woman who had once been his entire world, accompanied by 2 children who likely, were his. Fate indeed had a strange sense of humor. Lillian kept talking to her mom, telling her about Ethan's apartment, the piano he owned, how well he'd cared for them. She spoke as if Sophie could hear every word. Maybe she could. After a few minutes, Dr. Martinez returned. "We need to let her rest now. We can talk more in my office." Lillian kissed her mother's hand before letting go. "We'll come back tomorrow, I promise." In the doctor's office, Ethan placed Noah in the infant carrier they'd brought and sat Lillian by his side. "What are the real chances of her fully recovering?" he asked, choosing his words carefully so Lillian wouldn't be alarmed. "It's hard to say for certain," the doctor replied. "The hemorrhage was severe, but we intervened in time. The coma was induced to give her brain and body a chance to recover. Recent tests show normal brain activity, which is an excellent sign. How long until she wakes up? We're slowly reducing the sedation. If everything goes well, in a week or 2 we may try to bring her out of it completely." Ethan glanced at Lillian, who was listening carefully, even if she didn't understand all the medical terms. "What can we do?" he asked. "Visit her often. Talk to her. Some studies suggest coma patients can hear and sense their loved ones. It might help in her recovery." As they left the hospital, Lillian seemed lost in thought. In the car, she finally spoke. "She looked so small in that bed." Ethan nodded, understanding exactly how she felt. Sophie had always had a commanding presence, an energy that lit up any room. Seeing her so fragile and motionless was unsettling. "Can we come every day?" Lillian asked. I promised her. "Of course we can," Ethan answered, looking at her in the mirror. "Every day until she wakes up." On the ride back, Ethan thought about everything that had happened in these last few days, finding the children, learning about Sophie, seeing her again in the hospital. It was as if fate was finally correcting a detour, returning to his life people who should never have left it. "Ethan," Lillian said from the back seat, "thank you for taking us to see my mom." He smiled at her in the mirror. "You don't need to thank me. We'll help your mom get better as soon as possible." "You like her, right?" the girl asked, with the straightforward innocence of a child. Ethan hesitated only for a second. "Yes, Lillian. I like your mom very much." It was more than just like. Even after 6 years, even after all the pain of her unexplained departure, even now, seeing her unconscious in a hospital bed, he still loved her. And now, more than ever, he was determined not to lose her again. Not her, not the children destiny had placed in his life so unexpectedly. The drive back from the hospital was quiet. Ethan occasionally glanced in the mirror at Lillian, who kept her eyes fixed on the passing scenery. Noah slept peacefully in his car seat, oblivious to it all. The hospital visit had deeply affected each of them in different ways. When they arrived at the apartment, Ethan made a simple snack. Lillian barely touched her food, idly picking at her sandwich. "Not hungry?" he asked gently. Lillian shook her head, not looking up. Her small fingers pulled at the edges of the bread absently. "Want to talk about how you're feeling?" Ethan tried again, sitting beside her. For a long moment, Lillian remained silent. Then her voice came out small, almost a whisper. "What if Mum doesn't wake up?" The question hit Ethan like a punch to the stomach. It was the fear he himself carried, but tried to push away. Seeing Sophie in that hospital bed, so fragile, so unlike the vibrant woman he remembered, had been a bigger shock than he'd let on. "Your mum is very strong, Lillian," he said, choosing his words carefully. "The doctors are doing everything they can, and now she has an even bigger reason to fight, knowing you and Noah are waiting for her." Lillian finally looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Can you promise she'll wake up?" Ethan wished he could make that promise, assure her everything would be fine, that Sophie would return to her children, that their family would be whole again. But he couldn't lie. "I can't promise that, Lillian," he said softly. "No one can, but I can promise we'll be there for her every day. We'll do everything we can to help her. And no matter what happens, you and Noah will never be alone." It was as if a dam broke. Lillian threw herself into his arms, sobbing openly now. Ethan held her tight, letting her release all the fear she'd been holding back since she saw her mother in the hospital. "I'm scared," she confessed between sobs. "So scared." "I know," Ethan whispered, stroking her hair. "I am too. But we're in this together, okay? You, me, and Noah. We'll look after each other." Lillian nodded against his chest, still crying but calmer now. In that moment, something changed between them. They were no longer just a stranger and a child thrown together by chance. It was something deeper, more permanent. Later, after bathing the children and putting Noah to sleep, Ethan noticed Lillian was still restless. She tossed and turned in bed, unable to relax. "Having trouble sleeping?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Every time I close my eyes, I see Mom in that bed," Lillian confessed. Ethan thought for a moment. "When I was young and couldn't sleep, my mom would tell me stories." "Want to hear one?" Lillian's eyes lit up a bit. "What kind of story?" "How about the story of a very brave girl who had a special power? She could make anyone smile just by playing the piano." "Like Mom," Lillian observed. "Yes, exactly like your mom." Ethan improvised a tale about a young pianist traveling the world, healing sad hearts with her music. With each adventure, he saw Lillian relax a little more, her eyelids growing heavier. "And one day," he continued, "she met a man with the saddest heart of all. He had lost something very important and thought he'd never be happy again. But when he heard the girl's music, something incredible happened." "What?" Lillian asked, already half asleep. His heart began to mend, and he realized maybe he could find happiness again. Lillian gave a drowsy smile. "I like that story." "Me too," Ethan replied softly, realizing he had just recounted, without meaning to, his own story with Sophie. He was about to get up when Lillian's small hand grasped his. "Stay here until I fall asleep." "Of course," he agreed, settling himself more comfortably. It didn't take long for Lillian to drift off, but Ethan remained there, watching her. He looked over at the makeshift crib where Noah slept peacefully. These two little beings had come crashing into his life so abruptly, and now he couldn't imagine his days without them. In the middle of the night, he was awakened by screams. He raced to the children's room and found Lillian sitting up in bed, sobbing uncontrollably. It was just a nightmare, he assured her, sitting beside her and pulling her into a hug. "You're safe now." "She was leaving," Lillian sobbed. "Mum was leaving and I couldn't reach her." "It was just a bad dream," Ethan repeated, rocking her gently. "Your mum is in the hospital, being looked after. She's not going anywhere." Surprisingly, Noah hadn't woken up from the noise. Ethan brought Lillian a glass of water, which she sipped in small gulps. "Would you like to sleep in my room tonight?" he offered. "We can bring Noah's crib too." Lillian nodded, still trembling slightly. Together, they moved Noah's makeshift crib to Ethan's bedroom. She settled herself on his king-size bed, looking even smaller amidst the large pillows. "Better?" he asked, lying down beside her but keeping a respectful distance. "Yes," Lillian murmured, calmer now. After a moment, she added, "Ethan?" "Yes." "Thank you for taking care of us." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "There's no need to thank me, Lillian." She was silent for a few moments, then asked, "You knew my mom before, didn't you? Is that why you got sad when I said her name?" Lillian's perceptiveness continued to amaze him. "Yes," he finally admitted. "I knew your mom a long time ago." "Were you friends?" Ethan hesitated. "We were very close." That seemed to satisfy Lillian, who closed her eyes again. Soon, her breathing was steady, indicating she had fallen asleep. Ethan stayed awake, pondering how his life had changed in just a few days. Not only had he found Sophie again, he had likely discovered that he was a father, and maybe even a father to 2 children, it was a lot to process. In the morning, he was awakened by soft whimpers. Noah was hungry. Before Ethan could get up, Lillian was already on her feet, going to the makeshift crib. "I'll pick him up," she said, lifting her brother carefully. "Could you make his bottle?" Ethan smiled, impressed by the little girl's maturity. "Sure, let's work as a team." In the kitchen, as he prepared the bottle, he watched Lillian hold the baby, gently humming the same melody Sophie used to play. "Want to feed him?" Lillian offered, extending the baby toward Ethan. It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot. Lillian was trusting him with what she held most dear, her baby brother. "I'd love to," he said, sitting down and arranging Noah in his arms. As he fed the baby, with Lillian watching closely, Ethan felt a growing certainty within him. Whatever happened with Sophie, whatever the future held, he would do everything in his power to protect these children. Because, in a way he couldn't fully explain, they already felt like his family. In the following days, Ethan established a new rhythm in his life. The once quiet and orderly penthouse now showed clear signs of the children's presence. Toys scattered across the living room, baby bottles drying by the sink, small clothes neatly folded on the sofa. It was as if the place had finally come alive. Mornings started early, with Noah waking for his first bottle of the day. Ethan had become surprisingly good at preparing the milk at just the right temperature while still half asleep. Lillian usually woke up soon after, rubbing her tired eyes, but always willing to help with her little brother. "Can I hold him while you have your coffee?" she would offer, already stretching her arms out for the baby. Breakfast became a special time. Ethan made a point of cooking something tasty: pancakes, scrambled eggs, toast with jam. Lillian sat at the kitchen table, chatting to Noah about the plans for the day, as if the baby understood every word. After breakfast, they got ready for the daily hospital visit. Ethan had explained the situation at his workplace and was allowed to work remotely most days. His mornings now belonged to the children and to Sophie. At the hospital, the routine was always the same. Lillian hurried to her mother's side, sharing every bit of news from the previous day. Noah was placed near Sophie, sometimes even gently positioned next to her on the bed under close supervision. Ethan watched, his heart heavy with a mixture of hope and concern. "The doctors say she's responding well," he commented one morning, as Lillian showed Sophie a drawing she'd made. "They're gradually lowering the medication." Lillian nodded, not taking her eyes off her mother's pale face. "She'll wake up soon, I'm sure." The conviction in her voice gave Ethan strength. It was as though Lillian sensed something the adults couldn't. Afternoons were for work. After lunch, Ethan set up an improvised office in the living room, complete with a computer and piles of documents, while Lillian played quietly nearby, always keeping an eye on Noah. At first, Ethan tried to manage it all by himself. He took calls with Noah in his arms, joined video conferences while Lillian colored quietly at his side, and used the baby's nap time to catch up on reports. It was exhausting, but also strangely fulfilling. "Could you help me with something important?" he asked Lillian one particularly busy afternoon, handing her a stack of colored papers. "We need to sort these documents by color. It's a special job." It wasn't truly important, of course, but Lillian took the task seriously, carefully sorting the papers into neat piles. "Done," she announced proudly after 20 minutes of intense focus. "Excellent work," Ethan praised, examining the perfectly arranged papers. "You're a fantastic assistant." Lillian beamed. It was clear she enjoyed feeling useful, part of something important. After a few days of this routine, Ethan realized he needed help. No matter how much he wanted to do everything alone, the reality was he couldn't be a full-time executive and a full-time caretaker for 2 children at once. "I'm thinking of hiring someone to help out when I'm working," he mentioned at dinner. "What do you think, Lillian?" The girl paused with her fork in midair. "What kind of person?" "A nanny. Someone kind who loves kids and can stay here in the afternoons when I have important meetings or need to go to the office." Lillian considered the idea, furrowing her brow in concentration. "Will she be nice to Noah?" "Absolutely. I wouldn't hire anyone who wasn't." After some interviews, Ethan found Marta, a middle-aged woman with plenty of experience caring for children. Her calm, affectionate manner won Lillian over almost immediately, especially when Marta mentioned she could play just a little piano. "Can you play my mum's songs?" Lillian asked, excited. "You'll have to teach me," Marta replied with a smile. With Marta's help in the afternoons, Ethan found a more balanced routine. Mornings remained devoted to the children and the hospital visits. In the afternoons, he worked knowing Lillian and Noah were in good hands. Evenings were their family time, dinner together, playing or reading stories. Precious moments arose during those evenings. Ethan discovered the joy of building pillow forts in the living room, coloring fantastic drawings under Lillian's artistic guidance, and playing simple tunes on the piano while she hummed along. "Louder on this part," she instructed, standing on her tiptoes to reach the higher keys. "Mum always plays that part louder," Ethan obliged, watching in fascination as music transformed Lillian. In those moments, she seemed lighter, more like a child, forgetting for just a little while her worries about her hospitalized mother. Noah, too, had his place in those fun moments. Surprisingly for such a little baby, he seemed incredibly attentive to music. His eyes followed Lillian and Ethan as they played, and sometimes he'd wriggle as though wanting to join in. "He's going to be a musician too," Lillian declared confidently, "just like me and Mum." Over the following weeks, Ethan's penthouse transformed. He bought a proper bed for Lillian, replacing the guest room setup with a cheerful kids' bedroom. A real crib took the place of the improvised drawer for Noah. Toys, books, and the children's belongings blended seamlessly into the space, making it feel cozier. One night, after tucking Noah in and reading Lillian a bedtime story, Ethan paused at the doorway watching the two children sleep. It was hard to believe that just a few weeks ago they had been total strangers. He returned to the living room and looked around at evidence of this new life he was building. His work piled on the desk, toys tidied in a basket, recent photos of the kids already decorating the shelves. It was chaotic, challenging, and completely different from the neat and predictable life he once had. And he wouldn't trade it for anything. While pouring himself a coffee, he thought of Sophie lying in that hospital bed. What would she think of all this? Would she approve of how he was caring for her kids? Was there a chance for them, after all these years and unanswered questions? He didn't know. But for now, focusing on daily life, building this unexpected new routine, adapting to this role of father, yes, he already thought of himself as their father, was enough. The rest, the future, the explanations yet to come, those could wait. The weeks following the children's arrival saw a silent but profound transformation in Ethan's relationship with them. What began as a sudden and extraordinary situation, finding two kids alone in a park on a cold night, was becoming something deeper and more permanent. On a Saturday morning, Ethan was awakened by the sound of small, hurried footsteps. He opened his eyes to find Lillian by his bed, already dressed and combed, looking expectant. "You promised," she said, before he could even yawn. Ethan smiled, remembering the promise he'd made the night before. "The park, right. Let me get some coffee first." They still visited Sophie every day, but Ethan realized the importance of giving Lillian moments of normalcy and joy. Sophie was stable. The doctors were gradually reducing her sedation, hopeful she would soon regain consciousness. That morning, after checking on Sophie at the hospital, they headed to the large city park. Ethan took something out of the trunk that he'd secretly purchased, a small pink bicycle. Lillian's eyes went wide. "Is this for me?" "All yours," he confirmed. "I think it's time for you to learn how to ride without training wheels." Lillian touched the handlebars nervously. "What if I fall?" "Then you get up and try again," Ethan said, crouching to meet her gaze, "and I'll be right here to help. Always." The next few hours were dedicated to that mission. Ethan ran alongside the bike, holding on for balance, while Lillian pedaled with growing determination. Noah watched from his stroller, occasionally making curious noises. There were falls, scraped knees, and moments of frustration, but there was also perseverance. "One more time," Lillian said after each tumble, lifting her chin with resolve. Finally, early in the afternoon, it happened. Ethan let go of the handlebars and continued running beside her, not touching the bike. Lillian pedaled on her own, maintaining perfect balance. "I'm doing it!" she shouted, her face lit with pure joy. "Look, I'm riding on my own." "You're doing great," Ethan exclaimed, still running alongside, ready to catch her if needed, but giving her the space to own that victory herself. When they finally took a break, sitting on a bench in the shade, Lillian was beaming. "This is the best day of my life," she declared, biting into the sandwich Ethan had brought. "Even better than the day we won the pancake contest," he teased, referring to a homemade cooking competition they'd held the previous weekend. Lillian thought it over seriously. Almost as good as that. Noah, who was on Ethan's lap, began to squirm. When Ethan glanced down, something amazing happened. The baby looked directly into his face and broke into his very first genuine, broad smile. "Lillian, look!" Ethan called excitedly. "Noah's smiling." Lillian hurried over. "He is! He's never smiled like that before." It was a perfect moment, the three of them in the sunny park, sharing that small but meaningful milestone. Ethan felt something warm expand in his chest. Love, plain and simple. A love that grew by the day, with every shared moment. In the days that followed, the bonds between them grew even stronger. Evenings took on a special rhythm. After dinner, Ethan read stories to Lillian using different voices for each character and making her laugh with his over-the-top performances. Noah lay between them, his eyes increasingly alert, following their movements and sounds. One night, while Ethan told a story about a princess who saved an entire kingdom using only her wits, Lillian interrupted with a question. "What was my mom like when you met her?" The question caught Ethan off guard. He set the book aside, thinking carefully. "Your mom was extraordinary," he said at last. "Smart, talented, full of life. When she played the piano, it felt like the whole world paused to listen." "You liked her a lot, huh?" Lillian asked, watching him closely. "Yes," Ethan admitted, "very much." And now, the simplicity of the question masked its depth. Ethan looked at Lillian, then at Noah, who had dozed off between them. "I still do," he answered honestly. "Maybe more than before." Lillian nodded, satisfied with the response. Her eyes were starting to droop with sleep. "Good night, Ethan," she murmured, snuggling closer to her brother. "Good night, Lillian," he whispered, pulling the blanket over them. After she fell asleep, Ethan stayed seated on the edge of the bed, watching both children. It was remarkable how in such a short time, these two little lives had become the center of his world, an enormous responsibility, an indescribable privilege. The connection he felt went beyond anything he'd experienced before. He didn't need formal acknowledgement to know what he already felt in his heart. These children were a part of him now. Caring for Noah became a special bonding experience for all three of them. Bath time turned into a mini celebration. Lillian was in charge of the rubber duckies and creating elaborate stories, while Ethan handled the practical side, supporting Noah's head, gently washing him, rinsing carefully. Noah contributed with increasingly frequent smiles and coos of delight. "We make quite a team," Ethan commented one evening after they finally soothed Noah through a difficult bout of colic. "The best team," Lillian agreed, exhausted but pleased. There was a special glow in her eyes when she looked at Ethan now. Trust, security, and something that felt very close to love. One afternoon, while Ethan was working on his laptop, Lillian quietly approached and placed something beside him, a drawing. In it, 3 stick figures smiled under a bright yellow sun. Above them was the caption, in colorful, childish handwriting, "Our family." Ethan felt a tightness in his throat. He picked up the picture carefully, as if it were a priceless treasure. "It's beautiful, Lillian. I'll keep it forever." She smiled, satisfied, and went back to her play. But that moment, that simple drawing, meant everything. It confirmed that, in her eyes, they truly were a family now. During a hospital visit, while Noah slept in his stroller and Lillian excitedly told Sophie about learning to ride a bike, Ethan watched the scene with a full heart. These children had completely captured his affection. Somehow, amidst extraordinary circumstances, he had formed a deep, paternal bond with them. And when Sophie woke up, because he refused to consider any other scenario, They would face whatever came next together. They would talk about the past, about why she left, about the years they lost. There might be explanations, even forgiveness, but one thing was certain. The bonds he had forged with Lillian and Noah were permanent. No matter what happened, he would stand by them for the rest of his life. "Ethan," Lillian called out, breaking into his thoughts. "I think she moved her hand." Mom moved her hand. Ethan quickly went to the bedside. Sure enough, Sophie's fingers had twitched slightly. A small sign, perhaps, that she was coming back to them. Hope, already strong, flared brighter in that moment. Sophie was fighting her way back, and they would be there, waiting, a family on the verge of becoming whole. Sophie's finger movements were not an isolated event. In the following visits, more signs of improvement appeared. First, subtle changes in her brain waves as recorded by the monitors. Then, slight reactions to voices, especially Lillian's soft talking near her ear. "Her pupils are responding better to light," Dr. Martinez explained during a morning visit, "and her scans show more consistent brain activity. These are all promising signs." Ethan watched the doctor intently, searching for any hint that he was merely being optimistic. But this time, the optimism seemed genuine. "How long until she wakes up?" Ethan asked, carefully choosing his words for Lillian's sake, who was playing with Noah in the corner but surely listening to everything. "It's impossible to say exactly," the doctor replied, "but we're decreasing the sedation little by little. If she continues to respond well, perhaps in a few days we can try a controlled awakening." That news filled them all with renewed spirit. Lillian, who until then wore a perpetual worried expression during the visits, started smiling more and told brighter stories to her still unconscious mom. "Mom, you're going to love Ethan's apartment," she'd say, holding Sophie's hand. "He has a huge piano in the living room, bigger than ours, and Noah has a whole room just for him now." Ethan made a decision. He would spend his nights at the hospital. Sophie's progress was delicate and crucial, and he wanted to be there for every change. He arranged with Marta to stay with the children at night and reorganized his work schedule to be at the hospital as much as possible. "You don't have to do this," the head nurse commented when she saw Ethan settling into the uncomfortable chair beside Sophie's bed for the third consecutive night. "We can call you if there's any change." "I'd rather be here," he replied simply. During those nights, Ethan spoke to Sophie for hours. He told her about the kids, how Lillian had learned to ride her bike, how Noah had given his first real smile. He talked about the past, too, about the questions that were still unanswered, but always with a tone of understanding rather than accusation. "Whatever made you leave, Sophie?" he whispered one night, holding her hand. "It's okay. I just want you to come back to us, to your children. And if there's still a place for me in your life, then for me too." Inspired by her mom's improvement, Lillian began a special project. Every afternoon, she made colorful drawings to decorate Sophie's hospital room. "I want Mom to see pretty things when she wakes up," she explained, while carefully taping her creations on the austere white walls. The drawings transformed the entire environment. Pictures of the family, Lillian, Noah, Sophie, and noticeably Ethan. Bright landscapes, flowers, rainbows, and of course, lots of pianos. The hospital staff, touched by the girls' dedication, not only allowed the improvised decor but encouraged it. One nurse brought extra supplies for Lillian, and even Dr. Martinez remarked that Sophie's room had become the happiest place in the ward. Preparations for Sophie's anticipated awakening involved more than just decorating. Ethan brought some of her clothes from the small apartment Lillian helped him locate. He also brought a photo he found there, an image of Sophie pregnant, smiling radiantly at the camera with a very young Lillian by her side. "Ethan," Lillian said one afternoon as she taped up her latest drawing, "do you think Mom will remember everything when she wakes up?" The question caught him off guard. "I'm not sure, honey. Sometimes people who've been unconscious can be a bit confused at first, but I'm sure she'll remember you and Noah. And you, will she remember you too?" Ethan looked at Sophie, so serene in her deep sleep. "I hope so. But the most important thing is that she's coming back, right?" Lillian nodded, returning to her artwork. At that moment, a more pronounced movement made both of them glance at the bed. Sophie had turned her head slightly toward their voices, as though trying to find the source of that familiar sound. It was the clearest sign so far. Sophie was on her way back to them. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Ethan had left Lillian building a block tower, and Noah in Marta's capable care so he could spend the morning at the hospital. By now, the routine was so familiar, he barely thought about it. Breakfast, bottle, toys, car keys, everything flowed in an efficient, almost automatic sequence. At the hospital, he settled in the chair beside Sophie's bed as he always did. He opened his laptop to respond to a few work emails while chatting casually with her, telling her about Lillian's latest drawing and how Noah tried to roll over the night before. "He's determined like you," Ethan remarked with a smile, looking at Sophie's still form. "He won't give up until he gets what he wants." Then he noticed something. A different kind of movement. Not just a twitch of fingers or a slight turn of the head, but Sophie's eyes fluttering beneath her lids, as if she was trying to open them. Ethan snapped the laptop shut. "Sophie!" he called, leaning in. "Sophie, can you hear me?" A faint furrow appeared between her brows, the heart monitor registering a slight increase in her pulse. Ethan pressed the call button for the nurse and kept talking, his voice urgent yet filled with hope. "Sophie, it's me, Ethan. I'm here. You're safe. The kids are fine." Sophie's eyelids fluttered more intensely, and then, at last, they opened. For a moment, her eyes seemed unfocused, confused, the light probably too harsh after weeks in darkness. She blinked several times, trying to adjust. "Ethan." Her voice was barely audible, hoarse from lack of use. "Yes," he answered, tears pricking his eyes. "It's me." Just then, the nurse walked in, saw what was happening, and immediately summoned the doctor. Within moments, the room filled with medical staff checking vitals, asking quick questions, performing neurological tests. Ethan was gently guided to the corner while the medical team worked. He watched, almost unable to believe it, as Sophie responded, nodding or whispering a few words. She was disoriented, but conscious. She was back. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Martinez approached Ethan. "She's stable. Confusion is normal after a prolonged coma, but her neurological responses look very good. We'll keep monitoring closely, but this is..." He smiled, genuinely pleased. "This is extraordinary." When the staff finally cleared out, leaving just one nurse to adjust Sophie's equipment, Ethan returned to her bedside. Her eyes were more focused now, observing him with a mix of confusion and recognition. "Ethan," she repeated, her voice still weak but clearer. Why are you here?" He took her hand gently. "It's a long story. The important thing is you're all right." "The kids," Sophie managed, trying to sit up, panic flashing in her eyes. "Lillian, Noah." "They're fine," he assured her. "They're with me. I've been taking care of them since you were admitted." Sophie's expression was indescribable, a mixture of relief, confusion, and shock. You know about them. I found Lillian and Noah in the park a few weeks ago. Lillian was trying to look after him alone." He paused, recalling that cold night. "She's an incredible little girl, Sophie." Tears welled in Sophie's eyes. "They're really all right. They're great. Lillian is learning to play the piano at my place, and Noah's getting bigger every day." Ethan smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "I'll bring them to you right now. Lillian's been talking about you every single day." "Thank you," Sophie whispered, her eyes heavy with fatigue once again. "For taking care of them." Ethan drove back to the apartment, his heart pounding. How to explain to a 6-year-old that her mother, after weeks of unconsciousness, was finally awake? He decided to be direct and simple. When he walked in, Lillian was drawing at the table while Marta folded laundry. She looked up, surprised to see him home earlier than usual. "I have a surprise for you," he said, kneeling to her level. "What?" she asked, dropping her pencil crayon. "Your mom woke up." Lillian's eyes went wide, bright with shock and joy. "Mom woke up? Really? Did she talk? Did she ask about me?" "Yes, really. Yes, she talked, though she's still a bit weak. And yes, the first thing she asked about was you and Noah." Lillian threw her arms around Ethan's neck, hugging him as hard as her small body could manage. "Can we go see her now? Right now?" "Of course we can. Let's get ready and head straight there." Marta smiled, equally moved by the news. "That's wonderful. I'll help Lillian get dressed while you pack Noah's things." The entire ride to the hospital, Lillian couldn't stop talking. She planned everything she would tell her mother: how Ethan had found them, how big his apartment was, how Noah had grown, how she had learned to ride a bike. "And I'll tell her about the piano, and how Marta makes the best hot chocolate in the world, and how you've been taking really good care of us." She rambled breathlessly. Ethan smiled, watching her excitement in the rearview mirror. At least part of his own nervousness about the reunion was eased by her pure joy. When they arrived at the hospital, Lillian could barely wait for Ethan to park the car. He had to remind her several times not to run in the corridors. Even with Noah in his arms, he struggled to keep pace with her energy. At the door to Sophie's room, Lillian stopped abruptly. Suddenly hesitant, Ethan knelt beside her. "It's okay," he assured her. "Your mum's waiting for you." Lillian nodded, took a deep breath, then opened the door softly. Sophie was sitting up in bed, more alert after a few hours' rest. When she spotted her daughter, her face lit up with the brightest smile Ethan had ever seen. "Mom!" Lillian exclaimed, all hesitation gone. She ran to the bed and threw herself into Sophie's arms, who hugged her with all the strength she could muster. "My girl," Sophie sobbed, kissing Lillian's head over and over. "My brave, wonderful girl." Ethan lingered by the door, holding Noah, giving them a moment alone. The scene before him was so powerful, so intimate, that he felt almost like an intruder. "I thought you'd never wake up," Lillian said between sobs. "Ethan said you would, but it took so long. I'm sorry I worried you," Sophie replied, wiping her daughter's tears with her thumbs. "But I'm here now." "Forever." "Forever," Sophie promised. When their embrace finally ended, Sophie lifted her eyes to Ethan, still standing in the doorway with Noah. "Come here," she said, extending her arms. Ethan stepped forward and gently placed Noah into Sophie's waiting arms, her eyes filled with fresh tears as she beheld her son, who had visibly grown during the weeks she'd been unconscious. "My baby," she whispered, touching Noah's face reverently. "He's so big now." "He's grown a lot," Lillian said proudly. "And he smiles all the time now, especially at Ethan." Sophie glanced over at Ethan, a silent question in her gaze. "He's a very happy baby," Ethan simply said, "and Lillian has been the best big sister anyone could hope for." "Ethan found us in the park," Lillian began eagerly, wanting to tell her mother everything. "It was so cold, and Noah wouldn't stop crying. Ethan took us to his house. It's a huge apartment, Mom, on the top floor of a really tall building." Sophie listened intently as Lillian described the weeks they'd spent, how a doctor came to check on Noah, about the nanny Marta, the new bicycle, the daily hospital visits. "And Ethan said he knew you," Lillian concluded, looking between the two adults curiously. "He gets sad sometimes when he looks at you sleeping. I think he missed you a lot." A weighted silence fell over the room. Sophie didn't look away from Ethan, and he held her gaze. "Yes," Sophie finally said softly. "Ethan and I met a long time ago." "Were you friends?" Lillian asked. "We were very close," Sophie replied, still looking at Ethan. That seemed to quell Lillian's curiosity for now. She continued talking about her new life, while Sophie alternated her attention between her talkative daughter and the now sleeping baby in her arms. The afternoon passed quickly. Nurses came and went, checking Sophie's vitals. Dr. Martinez appeared for another exam, visibly pleased with her progress. When Lillian finally paused in her seemingly endless stories to use the restroom, Sophie looked directly at Ethan. "Ethan, we need to talk," she said quietly, so Lillian wouldn't overhear when she came back. "About everything, about the past, about Lillian." "I know," he replied, equally serious. "Not now," Sophie continued, settling Noah more comfortably in her arms. "Not in front of the kids, but there's a lot we need to discuss. Whenever you're ready." "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for taking care of them when I couldn't." "Don't thank me, Sophie. They're—" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. They're special to me, very special. Lillian's return ended the conversation, to the relief of both. There was so much left unsaid, so many questions, explanations, and maybe even accusations yet to come. But not today. Today was for celebration, the pure joy of reunion. When it was time to leave, Sophie needed rest, and Noah was getting fussy, needing his nighttime routine. Lillian was reluctant to let go. "We can come back first thing tomorrow," Ethan promised. "And the day after, and the day after that. And soon Mom will be able to come home," Lillian added to herself, almost in a whisper. "To our home." Ethan and Sophie exchanged a glance. So much complexity lay in that simple statement, so many decisions awaiting them. "One day at a time," Ethan said gently. "First, your mom needs to get completely better." Lillian nodded reluctantly and got ready to leave, but not before hugging her mother again, so tight that Sophie had to remind her to be careful with Noah in her arms. "I love you to the moon and back," Sophie whispered in her daughter's ear, repeating a phrase that was clearly special to them. "I love you to the farthest stars," Lillian replied, completing the familiar ritual. As he left the room with the children, Ethan looked back one last time. Sophie had tears in her eyes, but also a smile, the same smile he hadn't seen in over 6 years, yet remembered vividly. There was so much to resolve, so much that needed explaining. Why had she left? Why hadn't she returned? Why had she never told him about Lillian? And what would happen now? But those were questions for tomorrow. Today, as he took Lillian and Noah back to the home they had unexpectedly built together, Ethan allowed himself to feel only gratitude and hope. Sophie was back. They would figure out the rest together. The days following Sophie's awakening were filled with steady progress. Within a week, she was sitting up unaided and holding longer conversations without tiring. Physical therapy had started, daily sessions to regain muscle strength lost during her weeks of immobility. "I'm amazed at your recovery," Dr. Martinez said during his morning evaluation. "Your tests look great, and your physical progress is above expectations." "I have plenty of reasons to recover quickly," Sophie replied, glancing over to the corner of the room where Lillian was playing with a small doll Ethan had brought, while Noah slept in a portable crib. The visits were now longer and more frequent. Ethan rearranged his entire work schedule to spend more time at the hospital. Most mornings, he brought the children to be with Sophie while he worked on his laptop in the corner. After lunch, he'd take Lillian home so she could rest, then return alone in the evenings. It was during one of those evenings, after the kids were home with Marta, that Sophie finally felt ready to have the conversation both she and Ethan knew had to happen. "I think it's time," she said quietly, after the night nurse left, having done her routine checks. Ethan nodded, closing his laptop and pulling his chair closer to the bed. "I'm listening." Sophie took a deep breath, looking down at her own hands, which were marked by the IVs that had kept her nourished during the coma. Where to begin, when the story spanned so many years? "Do you remember how we first met?" she finally asked, lifting her gaze to his. Ethan smiled faintly. "Your recital at the conservatory. You played Chopin like you were born to do it, and you were in the front row. I couldn't take my eyes off you the entire performance." She smiled briefly at the memory, but her face grew serious again. "Those were the best years of my life, Ethan. You need to know that. What we had, what we built, I never stopped thinking about it for a single day. Then why did you leave?" The question that had tormented him for 6 years finally came out, direct and unfiltered. Sophie closed her eyes as though mustering courage. "My sister called me that morning. My father was dying of liver cirrhosis, the result of years of alcoholism. She said he was asking to see me. You never mentioned your father, or that you had a sister." "I lied, Ethan. I lied about my entire family." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze head-on. "My father was a violent man, abusive. He used to beat my mother until she couldn't take it anymore, and she left when I was 10, abandoning my sister and me. We grew up in constant fear." Ethan listened in silence, his expression grave. This was a side of Sophie he had never known. "When I went to college, I cut all ties. I started a new life, invented a new backstory, It was easier to pretend I was an orphan than explain all of this. She paused, breathing deeply. Then I met you, and by then I'd been living that lie for years. You came from such a perfect family, Ethan. How could you possibly understand? You never gave me a chance to try, he replied, his voice filled not with accusation, but with sadness. I know, it was cowardly. Then, when my sister called, I broke. Maybe I thought it was my chance to finally confront my past, to make peace with it somehow. Sophie wiped away a tear. I told myself it would only be a few days, that I'd come back and explain everything to you. But you never came back. No. Sophie looked out the window. When I got there, I found out I was pregnant. And that same day, my father, on his deathbed, told me my sister was in danger from her ex-boyfriend, a man as violent as he had been. He begged me to help her, not to let her repeat our mother's mistakes. Ethan leaned forward, absorbing every detail. The 6-year puzzle was finally taking shape. My sister tried to kill herself twice after our father died. She was completely broken, vulnerable. She needed me. Sophie turned back to Ethan. And I was pregnant, Ethan. Pregnant with your child. Despite having suspected this for weeks, hearing the confirmation made Ethan's heart clench. Lillian is my daughter. It wasn't a question, but Sophie answered anyway. Yes, Lillian is your daughter. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the steady beep of the monitors and the distant footsteps in the hallway. Why didn't you contact me after she was born? Ethan finally asked, his voice tense but controlled. At first, I was consumed with taking care of my sister and dealing with the pregnancy. Then, after Lillian was born, Sophie swallowed hard. The more time passed, the harder it got to explain. How could I show up with a baby after months of silence? What right did I have to barge back into your life after abandoning you with no explanation? Pride and shame kept me away. Ethan stood, unable to remain seated. He walked to the window, looking out at the city lights, trying to process everything. 6 years of questions answered in one conversation. You have every right to hate me, Ethan, Sophie said. I know what I did is unforgivable. I don't hate you, Sophie. He turned to face her. But I lost 6 years of my daughter's life. Years I'll never get back. I know. Tears streamed down Sophie's face. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that if you'll let me. Ethan returned to the chair, running his hands over his face as if trying to clear his thoughts. What about Noah? Sophie looked down. After nearly 3 years alone with Lillian, I met someone. I thought I could build a new life, give Lillian a complete family. But when I got pregnant with Noah, he left. He said he never wanted children, that it wasn't part of his plan. I'm sorry, Ethan said sincerely. Don't be, Sophie replied, surprising him. Noah is the best thing that could have happened, and he made me realize that no matter how I tried, I couldn't forget you. I couldn't replace what we had. They both fell silent, each absorbing the revelations and their implications. So, what do we do now? Ethan finally asked. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, Ethan. I know what I did was unforgivable. Sophie looked at him intently. But for Lillian's sake, maybe we can find a way forward. She deserves to have her father in her life. It's not just for Lillian, Ethan admitted. These weeks caring for the kids, visiting you. It made me realize I never really got over what we had. A flicker of hope lit Sophie's face. Do you think we could maybe with time? One step at a time, he said, smiling slightly. First, we need to tell Lillian. She has the right to know who her father is, Sophie nodded. Tomorrow, when she comes. Tomorrow, Ethan agreed. The next morning, after the doctor's rounds, Ethan arrived with the children. As usual, Lillian ran to hug her mother, while Noah, more active now, wiggled happily in Ethan's arms. Sophie and Ethan exchanged a meaningful look, both nervous about what they were about to do. Lillian, honey, Sophie called after a few minutes. There's something very important we need to talk about. The girl glanced curiously from Sophie to Ethan. What is it, Mom? Sophie reached out, indicating Lillian should sit beside her on the bed. Ethan drew closer, still holding Noah. Remember when you asked if Ethan and I were friends? Sophie began. Lillian nodded. Well, we were much more than friends. We loved each other very much. Sophie paused, choosing her words carefully. And, Lillian, Ethan is your dad. The girl's eyes went wide. She looked at Ethan as if seeing him in a new light. My dad? Really? Yes, sweetheart, Sophie confirmed. Your real father. For a moment, Lillian was motionless, processing the information. Then, without warning, she jumped off the bed and ran to Ethan, hugging his legs tightly. I knew it. I knew you were special. Ethan handed Noah to Sophie and knelt to return Lillian's embrace properly. Tears he couldn't control slid down his face. I love you so much, Lillian. You're my real dad, she repeated, as if trying out the words. Her smile was so radiant it lit up the entire room. Can I call you Dad now? I'd love that, Ethan answered, his voice trembling with emotion. Sophie watched, silently crying as she held Noah against her chest. It was a scene she'd never imagined seeing. Her daughter in her father's arms, finally uniting what should never have been separated. Does that mean we'll all live together forever? Lillian asked, looking from Ethan to Sophie, hope shining in her eyes. The adults exchanged a glance. It was a question they themselves didn't have an answer for yet. One step at a time, honey, Sophie said gently. First, I need to get better and leave the hospital. Then we can all talk about the future, okay? Lillian seemed satisfied with that answer. She returned to the bed and nestled beside her mum, with Noah between them. Ethan pulled a chair closer, and for the first time since these children came into his life, he truly felt they were forming a family. For the rest of the morning, Lillian peppered Ethan with questions, wanting to know everything about him, how he and Sophie met, about his extended family. So that means I have grandparents, she asked, eyes sparkling, and uncles, and cousins? Yes to all of that, Ethan replied with a smile. My parents are going to adore you, and my sister has 2 kids who are a bit older than you. Wow, Lillian breathed, marveling at the idea of a bigger family. That afternoon, when Lillian finally dozed off in an armchair from all the excitement, Ethan and Sophie spoke softly. She seems happy, Sophie observed, watching her daughter sleep. Kids are incredibly adaptable, Ethan said, but we need to be careful. Make decisions with their long-term well-being in mind. Sophie nodded. You've been a wonderful father to her, even without knowing, and to Noah, too. She hesitated. I know he's not your biological son, Ethan, but he's Lillian's brother, Ethan interrupted kindly. That already makes him part of my life, no matter what else. Sophie smiled gratefully, tears in her eyes. I don't deserve that kindness after what I've done. It's not about deserving, Ethan repeated the words he'd said before. It's about moving forward, building something new from what we have now. That evening, after bringing the children home, Ethan returned to the hospital. He found Sophie sitting up in bed, looking through a photo album he'd brought earlier, pictures of Lillian and Noah during the weeks they'd stayed with him. She looked so happy, Sophie commented, pointing at a photo of Lillian on her new bicycle, beaming with joy. You two bonded right away, didn't you? From the very first moment, Ethan confirmed, sitting next to her. It was like something inside me just knew somehow. Blood calls, Sophie said with a small smile. She flipped to another page and found a photo of Ethan asleep on the couch, with Noah resting on his chest. And it looks like this little guy stole your heart, too. They're both amazing, Sophie, truly. Ethan paused. And despite everything, I'm grateful I found them, even under such improbable circumstances. Sophie closed the album and looked at him directly. What happens now, Ethan? With us, I mean. I don't know, he answered honestly. We have a lot to rebuild, a lot of trust to regain, but I know I want to be part of Lillian's life, and Noah's, if you'll let me. And as for us, he took her hand gently. Maybe we can figure that out together, one day at a time. Sophie nodded, squeezing his hand in return. It wasn't a grand promise or a guaranteed happy ending, but it was a start. A chance to rebuild what had been broken and perhaps create something even stronger from the pieces. In the hospital corridor, preparing to head home, Ethan felt an odd sense of peace. The past couldn't be changed, and those 6 years he'd missed of Lillian's life would never come back. But the future lay open before them, filled with possibility. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt genuine hope for what that future might bring. In the weeks following the revelation of Lillian's paternity, a new dynamic took shape between Ethan and Sophie. What began as visits motivated by obligation and concern gradually turned into something deeper. It was visible in the little things. The way Ethan adjusted Sophie's pillows to make her more comfortable, how their fingers brushed when passing objects to each other, the exchanged looks whenever Lillian said something amusing. One night, after the children had fallen asleep in the hospital's makeshift children's corner, Sophie and Ethan sat by the window, gazing at the city lights. "Remember that night on the roof of your old apartment?" Sophie asked softly. "When we stayed up until dawn counting stars," Ethan smiled. "Ethan, and we promised that one day we'd go somewhere we could see the entire Milky Way, away from the city lights." "We never took that trip," she noted, a hint of sadness in her voice. "We still can," Ethan said, the words slipping out before he could think, surprising them both. Sophie looked at him, her eyes glistening with tears she didn't shed. "Do you think we could really start over, Ethan, after everything?" He took her hand gently. "I think we already started over, the day I found Lillian and Noah in that park." "I'm scared," Sophie admitted. "Scared I'll ruin it all again, that I don't deserve this second chance." "It's not about deserving," Ethan said. "It's about choosing a path together, day by day. Building something new with what we have right now." That night, under the silent witness of the stars barely visible through the hospital window, they shared their first kiss in more than 6 years. A hesitant kiss, full of unanswered questions, but also brimming with promise. Sophie's recovery advanced quickly. Intensive physical therapy and her determination to go home produced impressive results. 1 month of steady progress later, Dr. Martinez announced the news everyone had been waiting for. "We're ready to discharge Miss Evans tomorrow," he said, smiling at the small family group gathered in Sophie's room. "She'll need to continue therapy at home and come back for regular checkups, but there's no reason to keep her here any longer." Lillian jumped for joy at the announcement, and Noah, now more alert to everything around him, clapped his hands in imitation of his sister. "Where are we going?" Lillian asked, looking between Sophie and Ethan. It was a simple question, but charged with meaning. The adults exchanged a glance. Over the last few days, they'd talked a lot about the next steps. Sophie's small apartment wasn't suitable for the 4 of them, and Ethan's penthouse, though spacious, had stairs and lacked the setup Sophie needed for her recovery. "I found a new place," Ethan explained. "A single-story house with a yard near the park. It's perfect for your mom's recovery, and there's enough room for everyone." "We're all going to live together?" Lillian's eyes sparkled at the idea. "Yes," Sophie said, exchanging a shy smile with Ethan. "We're going to try." Moving into the new house was both chaotic and joyful. Ethan's friends helped bring Sophie's and the children's few belongings from her old apartment, while most of the furniture came from his place. Marta, the nanny, became an essential part of the team, helping organize everything while Sophie was still recovering. The new family routine felt surprisingly natural. Ethan, who once lived alone in a meticulously kept apartment, now found tiny socks between couch cushions and had to navigate hallways full of toys. And he loved every minute of it. Sophie, for her part, had to learn to share again, not just her space but the children's upbringing. Accustomed to doing everything by herself, she now had a partner, someone to share both the joys and the challenges of parenthood. "Funny how some things have changed and others stayed exactly the same," she remarked one evening as they finished cleaning up after dinner. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, putting away the last plate. "You still fold the towels the exact same way," Sophie teased, "and you still get that same focused look when you're working. But at the same time, it's different," Ethan finished. "We're different. Older, maybe wiser. Stronger, I hope," Sophie added, leaning against the counter. "What we have now will need to be stronger." It was on a calm Sunday afternoon, 3 months after Sophie left the hospital, that Ethan finally formalized what had become obvious to everyone who knew them. They'd taken the kids for a picnic in the park, the same park where he had found Lillian and Noah on that cold night. that now felt like another lifetime. While Lillian ran around with other children, and Noah napped in Sophie's arms, Ethan pulled a small box from his pocket. "It's not exactly how I planned it the first time," he admitted, opening the box to reveal a simple, yet elegant ring. "But maybe it's more fitting this way, with our kids around us, in the place that brought us back together." Sophie looked at the ring, then at Ethan, her eyes filling with tears. "Are you sure? Even after everything?" "I've never been so sure of anything," he said, taking her hand. "Sophie, will you marry me? Officially build this family that fate has brought together so unexpectedly?" "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." The wedding took place on a spring Saturday, in the garden of their new home, a house that had become a true home. It was an intimate ceremony with only close friends and family. Lillian, glowing in her pink flower girl dress, proudly carried the rings. Noah, perched on his newly met paternal grandmother's lap, watched it all with bright, curious eyes. "For a while, I thought this day would never come," Ethan's mother confessed during the reception, watching her son dance with his new wife. "After Sophie left, he just closed himself off. I never thought I'd see him so happy again." "Things happen for a reason," Ethan's father, a man of few words but deep wisdom, replied. "Maybe they had to walk their separate paths before finding their way back." In the months that followed, the Evans-Carter family found its rhythm. Sophie resumed teaching piano, now in the music room Ethan had built for her in their new house. Lillian, taking after her mother, showed growing talent on the piano, delighting everyone with little home recitals. Noah grew healthy and happy. His first steps were celebrated with so much excitement that neighbors came over to check on all the commotion. His cheerful, affectionate personality charmed everyone, especially Ethan, who took on the role of father to him with the same love and dedication he gave Lillian. 1 year after the wedding, on a quiet autumn night, the family gathered for a special dinner. There was no particular occasion, just a regular Tuesday meal. But as they sat at the table with candles lit and everyone's favorite food served, Ethan looked around and felt a surge of gratitude that almost took his breath away. There they were, Sophie, more beautiful than ever, laughing at something Lillian had said. Lillian, now 7, animatedly explaining a school project, and Noah, almost 2, trying to imitate his sister's words between spoonfuls of mashed potatoes. "A toast," Ethan said, raising his glass. "To our family." "To our family," Sophie and Lillian echoed, while Noah tapped his spoon happily on the table. Later, after the kids were in bed, Sophie and Ethan sat on the porch, something they'd done on countless nights since they'd moved in. The sky was unusually clear, allowing a few bright stars to pierce the city's light pollution. "You know what I think sometimes?" Sophie asked, snuggled against Ethan's chest. That maybe everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to." She lifted her face to look at him. "If I hadn't left, if I hadn't gone through all that alone, maybe we wouldn't value what we have now." Ethan pondered that for a moment. "You might be right. I still regret the lost years, especially with Lillian, but I can't deny that the challenges made us stronger, both as individuals and as a couple." "And they gave us Noah," Sophie added, smiling. "And they gave us Noah," Ethan agreed, kissing her gently. The path that brought them here had been unlikely and winding, at times painful. It was marked by hard decisions, 6 years of separation, secrets, and ultimately forgiveness. It wasn't easy to rebuild trust, to learn again how to be together, to create a new dynamic that accounted not only for their shared past, but also for the separate lives they'd led. But there, on that peaceful night, with their children sleeping soundly and their love renewed, Ethan and Sophie knew that every difficulty had been worth it. Fate had given them a second chance, embodied by 2 children found in a park on a frigid winter night, and they would not waste it. The family they built, forged through trials and redemption, was stronger and more precious than any dream they'd once shared. It was imperfect, complicated, and absolutely wonderful. And most importantly, it was theirs.